Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. And Boleyn, the queen who defied a king, and paid with her life, discover the truth behind her tragic execution and the impact she had on the history of England. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss anything. Imagine a young girl, surrounded by the opulence of the French court. Her family, although not belonging to the highest nobility, enjoyed a privileged position thanks to the service of her uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, at the court of Francis I. You see her growing up in the midst of luxury, learning the art of diplomacy and elegance that characterized the European nobility of the time. Lessons in etiquette, music and dance were part of her education, molding her personality and social development. In the bustling atmosphere of the court, and learned to navigate the complexities of politics and social relations. She observed the nobles, the kings, and absorbed the unspoken rules of the power game. The young Anne, with her keen intelligence and natural charm, became a privileged observer of the intrigues and alliances that shaped the destiny of France. She remembers that this sophisticated and competitive environment would profoundly mark her future. Although her childhood was privileged, it was not without its challenges. Life at court was a constant balancing act, where loyalty and cunning were as important as beauty and charm, and learned to move deftly among the strong personalities that surrounded her, absorbing the lessons of court life with a keenness that would prepare her for the challenges that awaited her in the future. You are witness to her training in the heart of Renaissance Europe. Remember small and surrounded by luxury at the French court. There, her education was carefully designed for a young woman of her position. Not only did she learn the arts befitting a noblewoman: music, dance, embroidery, but she also received an education in languages and literature, developing a keen mind and exceptional powers of observation. This knowledge would be crucial in her future, far beyond what she could then imagine. The parties and ceremonies of the French court were her training ground. There he got to know the nobility, observing their customs, their power games, and their alliances. He learned to move gracefully in those circles, to speak fluently, and to function as naturally as any member of the high aristocracy. It was an education in diplomacy and the art of persuasion, as subtle as it was effective. His first contacts with the nobility were not only superficial. He learned to discern between appearances and reality, to identify the true motivations behind smiles and polite conversations. He established connections, some superficial, some deeper, with characters who would later play a fundamental role in his life. These relationships, woven with patience and cunning, would be one of his most powerful weapons in his rise. And so, after years at the refined French court, Boleyn returned to England. Imagine the difference. From the sumptuous French palaces to the perhaps less opulent but equally intriguing atmosphere of the English court. Her uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, a powerful and shrewd man, played a crucial role in her arrival and subsequent rise. He introduced her to the court, using his influence to secure her a favorable position. Norfolk not only introduced her, he wove a web of contacts for her. He understood the power play of the English court, and knew how to use his connections to his niece's advantage. Remember, court was a place of intrigue, alliances, and betrayal, where family and connections could be the key to success or the cause of ruin. Her uncle's influence was not limited to introductions. Norfolk helped her navigate the complexities of court, advising her on who were her allies and who were her enemies. He shielded her from the many intrigues and rivalries that characterized court life, ensuring that her rise was as smooth as possible, at least at first. Thanks to her uncle, and did not start from scratch. She had a significant advantage. But forget the palaces for a moment. Think of Anne. Her arrival at the English court did not go unnoticed. We are talking about a woman with a captivating beauty, an elegant face, a penetrating gaze that mesmerized you. Her natural elegance, her royal bearing, radiated a magnetism that differentiated her from the other ladies of the court. It was not only physical beauty, but a beauty that emanated from within, a subtle but powerful force. Prosody, speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. This beauty was accompanied by exceptional intelligence. Anne was a cultured woman, educated in the best schools in France. She spoke several languages and possessed a quick and sharp wit. Her conversation was stimulating, full of wit and grace, capable of captivating even the most powerful king. She was no mere lady-in-waiting, but a woman with a brilliant mind and an impressive intellectual capacity. Her personality was as fascinating as her beauty. She was independent, self-confident, and undeterred by the court hierarchy. In a world dominated by men, Anne made her way with determination and an iron will, defying the social conventions and expectations of her time. Her charm lay in that unique combination of beauty, intelligence, and exceptional strength of character. But her beauty was not enough for Henry. He needed an heir, a male heir to ensure succession to the throne. With Catherine of Aragon, his first wife, he had had only one daughter, Mary. The pressure for an heir was immense. The stability of the kingdom depended on it. And Anne, with her charm and her promise of a male heir, became the center of his desires. The Catholic Church, however, stood in the way of his desire. To annul his marriage to Catherine was a heretical act, an affront to papal authority. But for Henry, the desire for a son outweighed any religious considerations. He needed an heir, and he was willing to defy the church to get one. Imagine the tension at court, the uncertainty of the future of the kingdom. So, with unrelenting determination, Henry began the annulment process. It was a long and complex process, full of political intrigue and religious pressure. But in the end, with the help of his allies, he succeeded in getting the Archbishop of Canterbury to annul his marriage to Catherine. This act, in addition to breaking with the Catholic Church, opened the way for him to marry Anne Boleyn, the woman who promised him the heir he so longed for. Think of the weight of that decision, of the consequences for him and for England. The English court was abuzz with rumors. You already know that Henry was dissatisfied with his marriage to Catherine. Then Anne Boleyn appeared, a lady-in-waiting to the Queen, with her elegance and wit that captivated everyone. Her beauty was different, more modern, perhaps, than that of the ladies of the court. And Henry, a man accustomed to power and adoration, felt an irresistible attraction to her. The romance began subtly, with furtive glances and conversations in the palace gardens. Henry, accustomed to women surrendering at his feet, found himself with a woman who challenged him, a woman who would not be so easily conquered. That only increased his fascination. Letters were crossed in secret, furtive trysts became more frequent. The king, accustomed to obedience, felt a strange excitement at this new and dangerous situation. For Henry, the desire for Anne was more than a simple physical attraction. It was a need, an obsession that consumed him. He, the King of England, was madly in love. But this love was forbidden, a challenge to tradition, to the church, to everything he stood for. The situation was explosive, full of risk and excitement, a secret that threatened to destroy everything. And, with her intelligence and charm, quickly won the king's confidence. From lady-in-waiting she became his confidant, his advisor, and his mistress. You will see how her influence grew exponentially. She was no longer just the king's favorite, but actively participated in political decisions, advising Henry on matters of state. Her rise was meteoric, leaving many courtiers speechless. Her opinion weighed more and more in royal decisions. Henry, completely enamored, consulted her on appointments, international treaties, even on religious matters. The break with Rome, a complex and risky process, was strongly influenced by Anne's ideas and desires. She longed for religious reform in England, and her influence was felt in the policies implemented by the king. Some nobles, accustomed to traditional power, viewed Anne's growing power with suspicion. Her rise represented a threat to their own ambitions and privileges. But for Henry, his love for Anne blinded him to the possible consequences. He had elevated her to the position of Marchioness of Pembroke, a title of great prestige, and her influence was undeniable. She became a key figure at court, a woman who defied convention and shaped the destiny of England. Prosody, speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. His affair with Anne, however, became a major problem for Henry. Married to Catherine of Aragon, aunt of Emperor Charles V, the king needed a legal solution in order to marry his mistress. The Catholic Church, to which England belonged, did not allow divorce. So, annulment of the marriage became his main goal. You will see how Henry, driven by desire and ambition, began to look for arguments to justify his decision to the court and, above all, to Europe. Theological arguments were key. It was argued that the marriage between Henry and Catherine was invalid from the start, based on Leviticus, a biblical passage that forbade marrying one's brother's wife. Since Catherine had previously been married to Henry's brother Arthur, the argument, though weak, served its purpose. Notice how religion was used as a political tool to justify a personal desire. But annulment was not just a religious issue. It had immense political implications. A marriage to Catherine, in addition to not producing a male heir, bound England to the powerful Spanish Empire. Breaking that bond meant considerable risk. However, Henry was willing to take it in order to get an. You will see how power and political ambition intertwined with his personal desires, leading to a decision that would change the course of English history. Love for Anne became an issue of state. To marry her, Henry needed to annul his marriage to Catherine, but Pope Clement VII refused, pressured by the powerful Emperor Charles V, Catherine's nephew. Imagine the pressure, the most powerful king in Europe defying the Pope himself. That refusal was the spark that lit the fuse of a religious revolution. Henry, with the support of his advisors, decided to take control of the church in England. It was a bold decision, breaking centuries of tradition and pitting him directly against the Holy See. He declared himself supreme head of the Church of England, an act that would forever transform the history of your country. Think of the impact: a king challenging the absolute power of the Pope. The dissolution of the monasteries began soon after. Imagine the wealth and power those monasteries represented, and how their dissolution strengthened the king's power and enriched the crown. It was a radical move with far-reaching social and economic consequences that marked a turning point in the relationship between state and religion in England. With the creation of the Church of England, Henry VIII consolidated his political and religious power, but also sowed the seeds of future religious tensions. The schism with Rome opened a new era, an era where the king, not the Pope, dictated the rules of faith. It was a decision that would forever change the course of English history, and marked the beginning of a new era in the life of the king and his reign. After years of struggle, the annulment of Henry's marriage to Catherine finally came to pass. You already know the story: the pressure on the Pope, the creation of the Church of England, also that he could marry Anne, and so it was. The wedding was a relatively low-key event, but Anne's coronation was anything but an unprecedented display of power and opulence. Imagine the scene: Westminster Abbey, adorned with jewels and precious fabrics, a sea of expectant people, and radiant, wearing a crown that reflected the sunlight. Her coronation was not just a social event, but a symbol of the new religious order that Henry was imposing. And now Queen became the central figure of this new church, a church that broke with Rome and placed Henry as the highest religious authority in England. Think of the radical change: from subject to queen, from submission to the Catholic Church to the leadership of a new faith. A change that, as you will see, had unpredictable consequences. The ceremony marked a before and after, not only for Anne, who ascended to the pinnacle of power, but for all of England. Religious reforms accelerated, monasteries were dissolved, and the wealth of the Catholic Church passed into the hands of the crown. It was a time of great transformation, a drastic change in the religious and political life of the country, all thanks to Henry's determination and the meteoric rise of Boleyn. A change that, despite its initial brightness, was strewn with shadows. After the annulment, the pressure on and intensified. Henry, desperate for a male heir to secure the succession, regarded her with a mixture of desire and growing impatience. Every month that passed without a successful pregnancy increased the tension at court. You know that the future of England depended, in his mind, on a legitimate son. /prosody /speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. Rumors about her infertility began to circulate, whispered in the corridors of the palace. The court, always attentive to the king's mood swings, was divided between those who supported Anne and those who expected her downfall. For Anne, the pressure was unbearable. Every look, every comment, was a reminder of her failure, or at least, of her apparent failure in Henry's eyes. Henry's obsession with a son was total. The weight of the crown, the political instability, and the need for a strong successor consumed him. And, aware of the importance of her role, submitted to treatments and remedies, some orthodox, others frankly bizarre. But time passed and despair grew, both in her and in the king. Despite giving birth to Princess Elizabeth, the joy was short-lived. For Henry, one daughter was insufficient. The need for a male heir eclipsed any other achievement, any other consideration. The pressure on and became unbearable, a crushing weight that would contribute to her tragic end. You already know what happened next, but have you ever really wondered the cost of that pressure? Finally, the day came. After months of anguished waiting, Anna gave birth. But the expected joy turned into cold disappointment. Instead of the male heir Henry desperately craved, a girl was born. Elizabeth, a little princess who, though beautiful and healthy, did not solve the problem of succession. Henry's gaze darkened. The promise of a secure future for his dynasty seemed even more distant. Elizabeth's birth, though a significant event in itself, only added to the tension at court. Rumors and intrigues intensified. Anne's inability to give birth to a male heir became a focal point for those who wished her downfall. The initial joy at the arrival of the princess quickly faded, overshadowed by growing uncertainty about the future of the crown. For you, the arrival of your daughter should have been a moment of immense joy, despite the expectations of the court. But the reality was unrelenting. The pressure on Anne was immense, and the lack of a male heir was becoming an increasingly powerful weapon in the hands of her enemies. Her future and Elizabeth's hung in the balance, although no one dared to say so openly at the time. The birth of a girl, instead of the much-desired heir, planted the seed of doubt in Henry's mind. Even before that moment, the murmurings at court were constant. You know that Anne's ambition and her influence over the king had created many enemies. Relegated nobles, disadvantaged advisors, all of them whispered in the shadows, weaving a web of intrigue that threatened to ensnare her. The rumors, initially innocent, became increasingly sinister. There was talk of infidelities, of secret relationships, of conspiracies against the king himself. Important names were mentioned in these whispers, some close to and others belonging to the opposition that sought her downfall. Each word sowed a new seed of suspicion in Henry's mind, a fertile ground for slander. Among Anne's most powerful enemies was the Howard family, with their unbridled ambition to regain lost royal favor. They, along with other resentful nobles, saw the situation as the perfect opportunity to get rid of the queen. It was then that the machinations began, the search for evidence, however weak, to justify the coming accusation. You could sense the storm that was coming. You know that the arrival of little Isabella was not received with the joy expected at court. Henry's disappointment was palpable. His gaze no longer shone with the same affection for Anne. The royal attentions, once so constant, became scarce, cold. Their meetings, once full of passion, were now marked by an uncomfortable silence, a distance that grew with each passing day. The queen, once the center of attention, was beginning to feel the chill of royal lovelessness. The king, increasingly irritable, found solace elsewhere. His eyes were fixed on other women of the court, an unmistakable sign of the change in his affections. The parties and celebrations, once starring and now took place without her presence or with merely formal participation, without the sparkle and glitter that once characterized her. The change was felt in the atmosphere. The court itself seemed to perceive the decline of her influence. The royal favor, once unbounded, was fading like morning mist, and, accustomed to adulation and power, found herself relegated to the background, watching helplessly as her position weakened. The splendor that surrounded her, the attention of the court, all seemed to wither, reflecting the cooling of the relationship with the king, a relationship that had determined the fate of England. Prosody, speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. The absence of a male heir had created an atmosphere of tension at court. You already know Henry's patience was wearing thin. It was then that the rumors began to emerge, whispered at first, but soon turned into formal accusations. A web of lies was being woven around and a conspiracy that would lead to her ruin. Mark Smeaton, a court musician, was the first to fall. Under pressure, he confessed to a relationship with the Queen, a confession extracted by torture and threats. His testimony, though false, served as the cornerstone of the prosecution's case against Anne. You may ask, how could anyone believe such a farce? Then came the accusations of incest, an accusation as absurd as the previous one, and was said to have had a relationship with her own brother, George. Evidently, there was no real proof, only rumors and speculation fueled by Anne's enemies at court, eager to see her fall. You are witness to the cruelty of the times. The charge of treason was the most serious, the one that would seal her fate. She was accused of conspiring against the king, of plotting his death and supplanting him on the throne. It was all a lie, a tissue of lies carefully constructed to eliminate a woman who was no longer useful to the king, and who, moreover, annoyed several members of the court. You will understand the magnitude of the injustice. And so, suddenly, everything changed. Can you imagine the panic, the uncertainty? And Boleyn, the queen, was accused of treason, incest and adultery. A rigged trial, a farce orchestrated by Anne's enemies and the ambitious who saw in her downfall an opportunity. The accusations were absurd, based on forced testimony and unsubstantiated rumors. The truth was that Enrique had already discarded her. His love had vanished. There was no fair trial, only a sham to justify the decision already made by Enrique. False evidence was presented, witnesses coerced. Everything pointed to a conspiracy against the king. But you and I know that the real conspiracy was the elimination of a queen who no longer served the monarch's purposes. The manipulation was blatant, obvious to those who had eyes to see. The judges, handpicked by Henry, did nothing more than ratify what the king had already decided. There was no royal defense, no opportunity for and to refute the accusations. Her fate was sealed from the moment Henry decided to replace her. The trial was a farce, a sad and dark representation of justice at the Tudor court. But what were these accusations? There was talk of an alleged affair with several men, including her own brother. Incredible, isn't it? Yet the evidence presented was as flimsy as a spider's web in the wind. Contradictory testimony, unsubstantiated rumors, court gossip. It was all based on innuendo and speculation. Mark Smeaton, a court musician, confessed to a relationship with the Queen under torture. Imagine the pressure, the fear, a forced confession? Probably. And the other defendants? Their testimonies were so inconsistent that they could not stand on their own. It was a farce, a setup to get rid of Anna. Even the accusation of incest with her brother, George Boleyn, lacked solid evidence. It was based on the testimony of people with ulterior motives, enemies of and who sought her downfall. The trial was a travesty of justice, a spectacle designed to convict her, regardless of the truth. You can see for yourself how flimsy the accusations against her were. There was no real evidence, only hearsay, speculation, and testimony obtained under duress. An unfair trial, a tragic end for a woman who had challenged the powers that be. So, there was Anna, accused of horrible crimes, with evidence so flimsy it was like something out of a bad play. The pressure was immense. The trial was a mere formality, a farce orchestrated to justify what had already been decided, her death. Imagine the tension, the uncertainty, the fear he must have felt in those moments. His fate was sealed. The sentence fell like a blow. Guilty of treason, incest, and adultery. Condemned to death. The news spread like wildfire. For you, what did it mean? A tragic end for a woman who had defied power. A queen fallen from grace. Her last hours became a whirlwind of emotions, between resignation and despair. The day of the execution arrived. On May 17, 1536, and Boleyn met her fate with surprising calm, according to accounts. It is said that she wore a wine-colored dress, elegant and sober, a final sign of her dignity in the face of impending death. Remember that this was not just any execution, it was the death of a queen. Prosody, speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. A French executioner, an expert in his macabre profession, was in charge of carrying out the sentence. A clean and quick blow, according to the chronicles, to avoid unnecessary suffering. The end of a life full of ambitions, intrigues, and a love that cost too much. His story, although tragic, continues to resonate in English history. Imagine and, locked in a small room, the silence broken only by the relentless ticking of a clock. Her fingers, pale and thin, fiddle with a small rosary, the only companion in her solitude. His gaze lost, fixed on an indeterminate point on the wall. His thoughts dance between the memory of his life, the splendor of the court, and the cruel reality of his imminent end. He remembers the laughter of his daughter, Elizabeth, a spark of hope in the midst of the storm. Regret, or was it just resignation, gnaws at her insides. Had she made mistakes? Could she have done something different? The betrayal of those who were once her friends, Enrique's coldness, all swirl in her mind, creating a maelstrom of confusing and painful emotions. The image of the execution, the guillotine, looms over her, a dark shadow that threatens to absorb her completely. But amidst the sadness and fear, something else emerges. A strange calm, a resigned acceptance of her fate. Perhaps, she thinks, this is the end of a painful chapter, but also the beginning of something new. His legacy, despite the injustice, will live on. The image of her daughter, Elizabeth, future queen, fills her last moments with a faint ray of hope, a future she will not be able to see, but which she will help shape from the other side. The jailer allows her one last visit. Anna, gazing blankly, embraces her few loyal friends, whispers of comfort, promises to remember. A sea of tears reflecting the fear and sadness that overwhelms them all. They say goodbye with a silence full of pain, a last handshake that speaks more than 1,000 words. At that moment, the fragility of life and the immensity of death hover over them, and you feel the weight of history in every sigh contained. Then comes the most heartbreaking moment. You are shown little Isabel, barely a child, approaching her mother. Anna hugs her tightly, her tears soaking the delicate dress of the little princess. Soothing words, promises of a future that may never be fulfilled. A kiss on the forehead sealing an eternal goodbye. The image of the little girl clinging to her mother, innocence in the face of tragedy, will take your breath away. Anna gives her daughter a small amulet, a tangible reminder of unconditional love, a last sigh of hope for an uncertain future. It is an instant charged with an emotion so deep that it will make you feel the closeness of death, and the strength of a maternal bond that transcends life itself. Observe every detail, the delicacy of the gesture, the weight of the moment. It is the end of a life, but also the beginning of a legend. The dawn of May 17, 1536 came with a cold cruelty. Can you imagine and, dressed in a simple gray dress, walking across the cold stone floors of the Tower of London? Her slow, steady steps to the scaffold contrasted with the whirlwind of emotions that surely flooded her heart. The few witnesses watched in silence, a silence charged with tension and sadness. The French executioner, expert in his macabre profession, approached. His gaze was cold, professional. There was no compassion in it, and, with surprising serenity, prepared for her end. A last sigh, a silent prayer, and then silence. His death, quick and relatively clean for the time, was not the end of his story. His execution marked a turning point in the reign of Henry VIII, consolidating his power and his break with Rome. But it also sowed the seeds of legend, and became a symbol of rebellion against oppression, a reminder of the cost of power and ambition. Her footsteps, slow and heavy, echoed on the cold stone. The execution had been swift, But the impact on Henry was immediate, devastating. He had gotten rid of his love, his political ally, but at what price? Anne's death meant not only the end of a turbulent marriage, but the beginning of a political instability that he himself had unleashed. He had been spared a troubled marriage, but had he gained anything in return? Anne's execution threw the court into turmoil. Her allies, fearful, retreated. Anne's powerful influence, which had once shaped English politics, vanished in an instant. Henry, accustomed to control, found himself plunged into profound loneliness. The loss of Anne, beyond the personal pain, meant the loss of an important counterweight in his reign. Prosody, speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. Anne's removal, however, did not bring the peace Henry craved. Political instability continued, fueling rumors and conspiracies. The power vacuum left by and contributed to an atmosphere of uncertainty at court, which resulted in a series of hasty and impulsive political decisions by the king, which only worsened the situation. The shadow of Anne's execution loomed over every decision. But Anne's death was not the end of her story. Her execution, though brutal, transformed her into a symbol. Think about it. A woman who defied the most powerful king in Europe, who dared to question the authority of the church. Her rebellion, though tragic, resonated through the centuries. She became an example, a beacon for women who would fight for their place in a world dominated by men. Her daughter, Elizabeth I, inherited not only her beauty, but also her indomitable spirit. Elizabeth, a queen in her own right, ruled England for decades, proving that strength and intelligence are not exclusively male attributes. Though separated by tragedy, mother and daughter share a legacy of power and determination that continues to inspire. And Boleyn's story continues to be told, reinterpreted, debated, not just as a victim, but as a complex, ambitious, and deeply human figure. Her story reminds us that even in the deepest tragedies, the strength of the human spirit can leave an indelible mark on the course of history. Her legacy is a reminder of the struggle for equality, freedom, and the right to challenge established power. But Anne's story does not end with her death. Her daughter, Elizabeth, inherited not only her beauty, but also a precarious position. Imagine a little girl, growing up in the shadow of her mother's execution. A royal princess, yes, but always with the weight of infamy and uncertainty about her future. In spite of everything, Elizabeth received an exceptional education. It was not a conventional education, but a rigorous instruction to form a future ruler. She had outstanding tutors who taught her Latin, Greek, history, music, and dance. She was instilled with a deep love of learning, a trait that would define her. Her life, however, was far from idyllic. After her mother's execution, Elizabeth was declared illegitimate, a label that constantly haunted her. She lived under the shadow of the power of her half-brother, Edward VI, and later of her half-sister, Mary I. Remember that Tudor court politics was a ruthless game, but Elizabeth learned to navigate those troubled waters. Her education, her intelligence, and her cunning enabled her to survive. She learned to bide her time, to watch, to learn from the mistakes of others. It was a hard lesson, but an essential one for the woman who would become Queen Elizabeth I. Growing up in the shadow of her mother's execution deeply marked Elizabeth. The image of Anne Boleyn, for you, is probably that of an unjustly executed queen, a victim of Henry VIII's ambition. But what truth is there in that image? History, as you know, is full of nuances. The Anne Boleyn we know is shaped by propaganda, both that which favored her in her rise and that which demonized her after her fall. Many modern historians struggle to separate myth from reality. Do a little research and you will see that her role in the break with Rome is questioned. Was she a conscious agent of change or a player in Henry's power play? Her intelligence and education, superior to many women of her time, are sometimes downplayed or interpreted as manipulation. The trial and execution, presented as fair in her time, seem to us today a farce. The accusations of incest and adultery lacked solid foundation, and were rather a pretext to get rid of a queen who no longer served the interests of the king. Remember that the image of Anne Boleyn has been carefully constructed and reconstructed over the centuries, influencing the perception we have of her today. But what role did Anne Boleyn play in all this religious change? Much more than you think. Her marriage to Henry VIII was not just a matter of love and power. It was a catalyst for the Reformation. You know that Henry longed for a male heir, but he was also frustrated with the Catholic Church, which refused to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. And, intelligent and ambitious, was caught up in this conflict from the beginning. Her influence on Henry was crucial to his decision to break with Rome. It was not just a matter of divorce. It was a major political and religious decision that would forever change the landscape of England. And, though not a theologian, was surrounded by advisors who supported the Reformation, and these ideas inevitably filtered into royal conversations. Prosody, or speak. Speak, prosody rate equals 90%, the dissolution of the monasteries, the confiscation of their lands and wealth, all this occurred under Henry's reign, and although it was not a decision directly made by Anne, her influence on the king is indisputable. She, at the center of power, became a symbol of religious change, even if that change was not as radical as some reformers desired. Her fall, however, did not stop the process. You see, for Henry, marriage was not just a matter of love. It was a matter of state, a key piece in his political game. He needed a male heir to ensure succession to the throne, and that justified any decision, no matter how harsh. His first marriage to Catherine of Aragon, though lasting, had not produced the desired heir, and that led him to seek a solution to his succession problem. And Boleyn represented a hope, an opportunity to break with the past and establish a new dynasty. But even with her, the pressure for a male heir was immense. Anne's inability to provide a male child, and the rumors surrounding her, were used by Henry and Anne's enemies as a justification for her downfall. Remember that succession to the throne was a matter of life and death in Tudor England. It was not only a question of legitimacy, but of power and stability for the realm. The need for a male heir was a constant pressure on Henry, who was willing to take drastic measures to ensure it. This political pressure influenced all his marriage decisions, including his decision to break with Rome. So, imagine life at the Tudor court. You, as a nobleman, rise with the sun, or nearly so. The day begins with masses and prayers, an obligation for all. Afterwards, a frugal breakfast, perhaps bread, cheese and fruit, no excessive luxuries. The day is filled with audiences, ceremonies, and the intricate dance of court politics. Intrigues and gossips spread like wildfire. Every move, every word, scrutinized with a magnifying glass. Afternoons are devoted to board games, hawk hunting, or simply chattering and strolling in the gardens. Fashion is serious business. Your dress should reflect your social standing and wealth. Remember, every detail counts, from the color of your fabric to the type of jewelry you wear. And of course, music and dancing are an essential part of court life, a place to socialize and establish alliances. But life was not all fun and games. Discipline was rigorous, and court etiquette was a maze of rules that had to be followed to the letter. A lapse in protocol could have serious consequences. Competition for royal favor was fierce, and friendships and enmities were woven and unraveled as quickly as rumors in the palace corridors. But back to Anne. Imagine the coldness of the stone beneath your feet, the echo of your footsteps in the corridors of the Tower of London. That fortress, which seems impregnable, becomes your prison, a place where the sun barely filters through and the shadow is the only companion. The history of the tower is full of tragedies, of imprisoned kings and queens, of conspiracies and executions. Its walls have witnessed centuries of suffering, and you now are part of that history. Think of the ghosts that surround you, the whispers of past victims. Every stone, every crack in the walls, tells you a story of pain and suffering. The tower is not just a prison. It is a symbol of the king's absolute power, a place where justice or injustice was mercilessly imposed. And you, Anna, will soon become another one of those stories, a new chapter in the long list of tragedies that have taken place within its walls. The executions in the tower were a spectacle, a demonstration of power. The guillotine, with its cold and menacing glare, awaits its turn. Many before you have gone through the same ordeal, their last hours echoing in the very walls that now contain you. Imagine the fear, the uncertainty, the agonizing wait before the executioner takes your life. The Tower of London, scene of so many dramas, awaits you for the final act of your life. Think of Anne Boleyn in her last moments, not only in the cold chill of the tower, but in the cloth that covered her. A dress, not just any dress, but a masterpiece of Tudor fashion. Imagine the richness of its fabrics, the delicate embroidery, the precision of each stitch. It was a conscious choice, a final message woven in silk and gold. The color, probably dark, perhaps a deep blue or a sober burgundy, symbolized the solemnity of the moment, but also its past power. The details, the gold and silver brocades, reflected his former position at court, a silent reminder of his greatness. Every detail was carefully chosen. It was not just any outfit, but a final statement. Prosody, speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. It was not just elegance. It was strategy. Through the fabric, and communicated her innocence, her dignity, her endurance even in the face of death. Her dress, in its simplicity and opulence, became a symbol, a final way to defy the narrative that had been constructed against her. A silent testament to her strength. Think now of how history has depicted and can you imagine the countless paintings, novels and films that have immortalized her? From official portraits that show her with a regal and majestic bearing, to more modern depictions that seek to delve deeper into her complex and contradictory personality. Each artist, each writer, has projected his or her own interpretation of the Queen, shaped by different eras and perspectives. In literature, and has been portrayed in various ways. As an ambitious villain, as a victim of power, or as a woman ahead of her time, intelligent and capable of manipulating the English court at will. Her story has inspired countless novels, plays and poems, each offering a new perspective on her life and tragic death. Which image of and resonates most with you? Art, for its part, has captured her image through the centuries. Some portraits show her as an imposing queen, while others present her as more vulnerable, reflecting the fragility of her position and the weight of the history that haunted her. Observe how the gaze of these portraits, the fabrics that dress her, the details of her jewelry, tell us about a fascinating woman full of nuances. But beyond the paintings and legends, what do we really know about Anne Boleyn? Her letters offer us a window into her personality. Imagine reading her own words, written in elegant calligraphy, revealing an intelligent, cultured woman with a keen sense of humor. Through her missives, we get a glimpse into her daily life at court, her worries, her joys, and her disappointments. In her letters to her brother, for example, we see a close and affectionate relationship. She speaks of political matters, but also of more personal issues, showing an intimate side that official history has often omitted. She was not just a queen, but a sister, a friend, a woman with a rich and complex inner life. Some of her letters reveal her intelligence and negotiating skills. She was not just a decorative figure, but a woman who actively participated in the politics of her time. Her words convey a firmness and determination that contrasts with the image of fragility often attributed to her. She was a woman who fought for her position and her future. So, after Anne's execution, Henry needed a new queen, one who would give him the longed-for male heir. And there came Jane Seymour, a court lady far more discreet and submissive than Anne. I imagine you, like many, are wondering, was it love, strategy, or a mixture of both? The story leaves us with more questions than answers about her true feelings. Jane, unlike Anne, adapted perfectly to life at court. She was a woman of quiet beauty, a stark contrast to the vibrant personality of her predecessor. Her rise was swift and quiet, a very different path from that of Anne, who had defied the conventions of the time. Her marriage, unlike Henry's to Anne, was much quieter and less scandalous. The main goal was clear, an heir, and unlike Anne, Jane achieved her purpose. This pregnancy was received with great relief by the English court, after years of uncertainty and failure. But the joy would be short-lived. The birth of Edward VI, the future king, would prove fatal for Jane. Her death, shortly after the birth of her son, made her a tragic figure, but also a symbol of motherhood and sacrifice at the Tudor court. Think of the price these women paid for the longing for an heir. But Anne's story cannot be understood without that of her family. The Boleyns, an ambitious family of noble origins, though not of the highest lineage, climbed the ranks of the English court with a mixture of cunning and strategic relationships. Her father, Thomas Boleyn, was a diplomat who knew how to take advantage of opportunities to rise, and her mother, Lady Elizabeth Howard, came from a family with royal connections, and was not the only Boleyn daughter with talent and ambition. Her sister Mary also moved in the circles of power, managing to marry Henry Percy, heir to Northumberland, a marriage that promised an even greater rise in the social hierarchy. However, this marriage was forbidden by Henry VIII, who had other plans for Mary and, of course, for Anne. The fall of the Boleyn family was as swift and brutal as their rise. After Anne's execution, her brothers and sisters were investigated, their property confiscated and their lives marked by suspicion and fear. Unbridled ambition and misguided political alliances sealed the fate of a family that, for a time, seemed destined to reign. Prosody, speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. So who were Anne Boleyn's lovers? That is the question that echoed through the centuries, fueled by Henry VIII propaganda. He needed an excuse, a justifiable reason to get rid of her, once she ceased to be useful. The accusation of adultery, reality, or a carefully orchestrated farce to silence a queen who no longer served his purposes. The accusations were leveled against several men, some close to the court. There was talk of Mark Smeaton, the musician, a man of relatively low position, and other more powerful nobles. But the evidence was flimsy, based on testimony obtained under torture, coerced statements, and hearsay. Can you imagine living under that pressure, forced to confess to something you didn't do? The reality is that Henry VIII probably fabricated the evidence so he could divorce and then marry Jane Seymour. He needed a male heir, and Anne, after several pregnancies that ended in girls or miscarriages, had become an obstacle. The image of the adulterous queen served to justify her fall from grace in the eyes of the people. Today, many historians agree that the accusations of adultery against Anne Boleyn were a political farce. An uncomfortable queen who challenged the conventions and power of the king paid the highest price for it. Her story reminds us of the fragility of power and the manipulation that can hide behind appearances. But what did it really mean to live in the Tudor court? Imagine a world of dazzling opulence. Endless banquets with tables laden with exotic delicacies, clothes richly embroidered with gold and precious stones, and music resounding in the great halls. But such extreme luxury contrasted sharply with the reality for many, a life where poverty and disease lurked at the palace gates. Cruelty was an integral part of daily life. Public executions were common, a form of intimidation and control. Treason, even suspicion of it, was severely punished, and life at court was a constant dance between royal favor and disgrace. A simple error in judgment could mean ruin, imprisonment, or worse. Competition for royal favor was fierce. Palace intrigues, gossip, and false accusations were rife. Court life was a dangerous game, where loyalty and friendship were often sacrificed on the altar of ambition. And Boleyn learned this the hard way, a victim of the machinations of a court where cruelty and luxury were dangerously intertwined. From opulence to the cold reality of a rigged trial. Imagine the scene. You, in Anne's place, accused of treason, incest, and adultery. The accusations, vague and without solid evidence, are thrown like poisoned darts. Who are your accusers? What evidence do they present? In reality, little, and based on hearsay and dubious testimony, obtained under pressure, perhaps even torture. The trial is a farce, a show designed for your conviction. You have no right to a fair trial, no right to a defense attorney who truly represents you. Your words are twisted, your arguments ignored. The court, controlled by Henry VIII, is determined to see you fall. The weight of the crown, the desire for a male heir, crushes any chance of justice. Think of the weight of the accusation of incest, an infamous stain on your honor. How can you defend yourself against something so monstrous, when the evidence is fabricated, manipulated to fit the king's royal narrative? Betrayal of the crown also rises like a dark shadow, though your loyalty was never in question, at least not in the sense they try to impose. And adultery. With whom? The names mentioned are shadows, vague figures used to feed the narrative of disloyalty. The verdict is foregone, a conclusion written long before the trial began. Your fate is already sealed, even before the words that condemn you to death are spoken. Think of other queens who suffered a similar fate. How many were accused of treason, of conspiracy against the king? History is full of examples, but were their trials as rigged as yours, and did they have the same lack of real evidence? You are accused of adultery, incest, terrible accusations hanging over your head, but how different is your case from other women in positions of power who were eliminated by their enemies? Remember Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, also executed. She too was accused of treason, although her story is a long and complex one, full of political intrigue. But like you, she was a powerful woman who threatened those around her. Was her execution a question of power, just like yours? Or was there really a solid basis for the accusations in both cases? Prosody, speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. Comparing your case with those of other executed queens leads to a disturbing conclusion. Power, ambition, and politics played a crucial role in your fates. Were your deaths merely a sacrifice on the altar of politics? Or is there more to the story of each of you? Analyze the parallels, the differences. What conclusions can you draw? But Anna's story does not end on the scaffold. Her execution, though brutal, became a symbol. Think of her as a woman who defied power, who dared to want more than society allowed. Although her death was orchestrated by a ruthless king, her memory has become a beacon for women throughout the centuries. Her story reminds us of the importance of fighting for equality and justice. And Boleyn, although she did not consider herself a feminist in the modern sense of the term, embodies the struggle against female oppression. Her rise in the Tudor court, her intelligence and ambition, were qualities that made her a threat to the patriarchal system of the time. Her story has been used to inspire women throughout history to break down barriers and fight for their rights. Feminism has reinterpreted her figure, recognizing in her a symbol of resistance to a system that silences and condemns her unjustly. Her story has become an example of how patriarchal power can attempt to crush women who challenge the status quo, but also how the memory of these women can endure and become a source of inspiration for future generations. Their legacy is a constant reminder of the struggle for gender equality. Her story, transcended execution, and Boleyn became a symbol of rebellion, of a woman who defied the conventions of her time. She was not just a queen, she was a figure that resonated through the centuries, a woman who paid a terrible price for her ambitions and her desire for independence. Think of her legacy, how her daughter, Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, ruled England with a firm hand, perhaps influenced by her mother's tragic fate. And Boleyn, though executed, left an indelible mark on English history. Her story serves as a reminder of the complexity of historical figures. Today, centuries later, we remain fascinated by her. Her story, full of intrigue, love, and tragedy, captivates us. And Boleyn was a complex, ambitious, and courageous woman, a figure who, despite her tragic end, continues to inspire and challenge our perceptions of power, ambition, and destiny. I hope you enjoyed this story. And Boleyn remains an enigma, doesn't she? If you liked it, like it, and subscribe for more. What do you think? Leave it in the comments. /prosody/speak.